recorded this computer. Okay, so now y'all are on camera. But good thing you're little chicklets, so it's really the focus is going to be on the presentation. And when it comes time for us to do questions, I'll take it off the presentation. Okay, so first of all, this is practicum and internship take 2. Last time that you were at residency, and of course it was virtual, we apologize. You know, nobody expected COVID, nobody wanted COVID. Apparently COVID has its like staying power. And so the residency that some of y'all did in the fall was virtual, and the residency that those of you that are spring teams is going to be virtual as well. It just, when, you know, I know we've had some concerns about that. I know that there's been some emails or some communications with Dr. Mayorella, but we just professionally and ethically could not bring together people from across even counties, if not even the world, and put them in a safe space and ensure that everybody would remain healthy. Particularly those of you that are coming back for group, you know, the students that are coming back for group, you are in an enclosed space when you are at residency for 2 to 3 hours at a time for about 10 hours across the couple days of residency. It's simply not safe for us to do that for y'all. And we apologize because we absolutely love what residency does. It's an opportunity to, you know, be in person. In fact, the hotel where we do residency has still not opened up to meetings. So they're not holding meetings and conferences yet, which is of course a further hindrance for us. So, okay, almost a year ago, Ms. Nicolau met with y'all and talked about just kind of the overview of practicum and internship. I always really like to talk about, you know, all those classes that you're taking. How does that fit into what you really want to do, which is the practicum and the internship? The sitting in front of a student or a client and working with them as a counselor. Well, now you are finally here, as we should say, you have arrived. In May of this coming year, you will begin your practicum. We begin practicum for all fall and spring teams in May. Okay, let that kind of sink in because that is coming up, and let me go to the next slide. So hello. Here I am, Dr. Kolstad. I am the academic director of the program. As y'all know from coming in, we have a program director who handles kind of the nuts and bolts, scheduling, you know, any questions you have about your registration. She can, we usually pawn off the financial aid questions, but anything with taking a leave, taking, you know, less classes, all of those things Dr. Mayorella handles. I handle the academic professional side of things. And I also, as I started the call, but in case you joined on, we have a new assistant clinical coordinator, and it's Mr. Anthony Pacifico. He is a graduate of our MAEDS in the on-campus program, and he is teaching on campus for us. So when it came time to figure out who was going to fill those shoes, those very big shoes, because it's an important role, actually the dean, who apparently just absolutely loves Mr. Pacifico, said, "This is who I want." I guess you must have been a GA for the dean, or you were a GA, and he got to know you, and he knew that that Mr. Pacifico could jump in and do the job well. Of course, the biggest learning curve that we all have is Tavera, and so that is something that he's just recently been exposed to, but we'll talk about that with y'all in just a minute. So this is us. My groovy partner in my picture is my daughter, and you'll hear about her a lot, not quite as much as when she was in person with me, but she is now her first year in college, and she always liked taking pictures with me more than the other boys did. So I've got lots of stories with her. Of course, she's my only girl. And this is a picture of Mr. Pacifico out with friends, right?
Yeah, so actually, hi everyone. Nice to meet all of you. Actually, how Dr. Kolstad said this before, those are actually my cohort members. We don't do cohort in person, but those are all my classmates. We've probably had 95% of classes together, and we're still good friends to this day.
Awesome. Right. And as he said, you know, we are different in that you definitely have a cohort moving through the program on campus. You can develop that cohort because it's, you know, especially if people are kind of in the same kind of, you know, stage as you, where you have the ability to take the classes and schedule your, you know, kind of have that flexibility to make sure that you schedule classes together, or it just sort of happens that way. That's a really wonderful thing. Okay, so here we are. Well, actually, here you are is in this first column, the foundational. You've taken skills, you've taken your orientation class, you either are taking group counseling or will be taking it this spring. Theories, human development, all of those things we call the foundational courses. Those are the courses that are the building blocks for you to have skill, knowledge, and professionalism as you approach the practicum and internship. Actual 2 semester or 2 blocks that are the actual clinical part of the counselor preparation sequence are practicum and internship. Now, a couple of the questions that we got in the through the survey, and a question that I get all the time is, what's the difference between practicum and internship? I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a minute, but let me share with you the biggest difference. Practicum is 100 hours. Each internship semester is 300 hours. So 600 hours total. That is the biggest difference. For those of you that are in the mental health program and you're getting your master's in counseling, you most likely will do all of your hours in the same setting. For those of you that are in school counseling, you will do a practicum in a mental health setting, and you will do internship 1 and internship 2 in the schools. So that's where we get to the whole reason why, regardless of whether you are a fall team or a spring team, you start your practicum in May, because those of you in the school program have to be able to be in a school setting for internship per New Jersey state regulations. So you also may ask, well, if I'm in a school counseling program, why do I have to be in a mental health setting? Because as a program, our philosophy is that you are trained as a counselor first, and then you specialize to be a school counselor. And for most of us, we know that even before COVID hit, kids were hurting, right? They were hurting. They couldn't get into counselors. The wait lists were 6 months long. We were seeing higher rates of depression, anxiety, even among our youngest elementary age kids, and particularly among our teens. And gosh, don't even talk to me about the tweens in middle school. That's kind of a cesspool. And that's a breeding, it's like a breeding ground for mental health issues, right? And people weren't getting seen. Most counselors were not trained to counsel. Even if we're not talking about deep therapeutic counseling in the schools, we're still talking about facilitative counseling to support them being successful in their academic environment. So we take that very seriously. COVID, there's a silver lining to it. COVID opened up opportunities for people to counsel from whenever and wherever, right? Telehealth, telecounseling, telemedicine, and all of that. And it also brought to light that dirty little secret, which is mental health problems. People who are struggling, kids struggling in school because of attention, behavior, emotional issues, people in general struggling in their lives, because now all of a sudden COVID made us very isolated, and it brought a lot of anxiety and depression to people that maybe had never experienced anything like that before. And so all of a sudden, that thing that we never talked about or rarely talked about became something that we talked a lot about. So our profession as counselors and school counselors was validated. So that's my silver lining, right? So now when you go into the school setting, those of you that are in school counseling, you do need to focus on social and emotional issues that impact learning, because that's actually a mandate in many districts around the country. Mental health folks, y'all already knew that. You already knew that it's important to focus on it. So as I said, you mostly stay in the same site for your 3 semesters. Sometimes people will switch. I don't really want to get into the internship 3, but that's kind of a logical time where people might switch into a new site. If we have time, we'll talk about that at the end of our meeting. But we will have, if we don't talk about it now, we will have another meeting later. Anybody who wants to do the EDS in the school counseling program, you do not make that decision until the end of your 100 hours in practicum, okay? You don't have to make that decision yet. And we don't want you to, because you don't know yet if you're interested in working with people outside of a school setting. Most of our mental health students, you are going to complete the EDS because you need the 60 credits for licensure, okay? But the school counseling folks, you can get your certification at the end of the 48 credits. So let's go ahead and move on. So tell me more about practicum. as I mentioned before, when I was in training and when many people were in training, your practicum was in a lab setting. You were behind a two-way glass and maybe they had a phone and they'd call and ring, ring, ring. Hey, Jody, you're sucking right now. You should probably not do that. They didn't actually say that, but you did fear that your supervisor would call you or tap on the glass and tell you were doing something wrong with your contrived client who really didn't have any issues. We believe that the best training is in real life settings. And because you are not in New Jersey, close to the Seton Hall campus, you actually have to be in real life settings. It's a little more challenging to get a practicum for those of you that are school counseling students because you're only there a short period of time. And it's a little more challenging in general because it's always reminds me of the whole, well, how do you get a job if they want you to have experience, but you don't have experience and you need the job to get that experience so that you can get a job, right? It's very, very circular. You'll find that when you are seeking a site is that some sites want you to have a little bit more experience and you're kind of like, yeah, but I need a site to get that experience. So understand we get the stress of this process and understand that sometimes the sites are a little further removed from when they did their internships, so they don't really remember what it was like. But we are here to support you through the process. So you will be in an actual setting. Those settings can vary. I mean, I don't encourage hospitals because hospitals don't allow you to really engage in ongoing relationships. The severity of the clients are such that they are in and out. Basically, the goal of an inpatient setting, even an intensive outpatient setting or partial hospital setting is stabilization. It's not really change. Okay, it's to stabilize the client and move them to an outpatient environment. So we do in Tavera, and we'll talk a little bit more about Tavera, but in Tavera, we have a wide list of sites. Those sites are usually ones that we have used in the past, that we have active agreements with. Some of the sites we don't have active agreements with, but we still have listed because they have taken our students before. But let me tell you, if you have a site that you are aware of in your community, you know somebody, you've been referred there as an opportunity, or it's really a site that you've heard a little bit about and it sounds interesting to you and it's not on our list, that's a-okay. We love to expand our list. Okay, practicum really is dipping your toes in the water. So you'll see this analogy of swimming. That long ago, I tried to describe practicum as that, and it really makes sense to me. We don't expect you to know exactly what you are doing when you get into your practicum setting. The good news is the clients don't realize you don't know what you're doing, okay? So they're just as nervous as you are. You have that knowledge. That's where that whole foundational stuff comes from. You have the knowledge and you have the skills. You just haven't put them together yet. So by introducing you to appropriate clients and keeping your caseload really small, because keep in mind, with 100 hours over a 14-week summer semester, that's about 7 hours a week on site. And that's about 2 to 3 clients per week. Now, if you get started seeing clients later, obviously your client hours ramp up a little bit more, but on average, that's what it is. So it really is dipping your toes. You aren't having a caseload of 12 people. You're not expected to work with the suicidal client that has borderline personality disorder and recently just got out of the hospital. We would expect your supervisor to choose somebody that is going to be appropriate for your level of training and that they feel like they can help you be successful in working with that person. Sometimes your supervisor may wait, like you may get on site and wait a month until you have your own caseload or your own clients. And some sites are going to, you'll walk in the door and they'll be like, hey, hey, Angela, here's 6 people I want you to contact to see if any of them want to come in, right? Every site's going to be different. And that's okay. They have their own method of training. As long as by the end of the semester, they meet our requirements and really focus on growing you as a counselor, ultimately it ends up being a good site. So as I've mentioned, 100 hours on site, 2 hours per week. You also are doing classwork, keeping in mind that in each of these 3 semesters, and I'm going to focus just on the 3 semesters and not the internship 3. In the practicum, the internship 1 and the internship 2, there is classwork. You are given total 22.5 hours per semester of your hours for classwork. So as you can tell, that means that your site hours really, I mean, you're going to go over on indirect hours. We require 40 direct hours, 60 indirect hours. And a question has come up, what are indirect hours? I laughingly call them the trash can of clinical training, because basically everything can go in there. It's not the recycling bin, mind you. That's kind of like direct hours. It's the trash can. And working with your site supervisor, writing case notes, session prep, prepping for your case presentation, responding in the discussion boards. That's where the 1.5 hours per week comes from, is the responding in the discussion boards, because that's consultation. And so that counts. I always say that the only thing that really doesn't count as clinical, as indirect hours, is thinking about your client. So you can't just think about your client on the way to your site and count your drive. So that doesn't work. Okay. You also have classwork in the way of assignments. Practicum has the most amount of work. Internship 2 has the least amount of work. So practicum trains you not just to counsel, but you're also learning how to write clinically, conceptualize, diagnose, and write treatment plans. So as you can imagine, that's kind of a busy semester. It is. We try and make it into a couple different assignments so it doesn't feel like 18 different things that you're doing. But when you first enter practicum, understand you're going to have a moment where you're like, holy mac, I have to do all of this. But it all works out in the end once you get yourself organized. Trust me. Okay. So internship, let me tell you a little bit more about internship. Just like this smiling girl in the water, you will be swimming with floaties. You are still not completely at the level that other counselors at the site are. You're still a trainee, okay? Mostly you will continue at your site or you'll change to your school setting. This is in the fall semester. And let me just go back. There is a question that we had, which is, when does the clinical sequence start? Are there different start dates? It always starts in May. So if you were to decide not to start this May, and I hope you will start this May, if you were to decide not to, you would have to wait an entire year, and that would push your graduation back by a year. So that is I saw 2 people ask that question. With the internship, you ramp up by 3 times your hours. So you're doing 300 total, about 18.5 hours per week on site, 1.5 hours per week is class time counted, 8 direct hours a week if you have a perfect semester, and you completely, over that 15 weeks, get 8 hours a week of 8 direct hours a week, you'll hit your 120 direct hours, 180 indirect hours. So when you think about the hours, you're always multiplying by 3. So you had 40 in practicum, 120 in internships for direct hours. And the same thing, 180 indirect hours. Classwork reduces because your caseload has increased. Your hours on site have increased. So you still have a case presentation, and you still have what we call a CADI, Clinical Assessment and Treatment Integration paper. That's a paper where you conceptualize, diagnose, write a treatment plan, do a history report, all of that. It's slightly different in internship 1. You add to it, but it's those 2 main assignments for your class. Internship 2, you're basically doing what you did in internship 1, but at this point, you're diving full on in. Hopefully not spread eagle like that. We don't want any like belly busters, but you oftentimes are considered a colleague on site and a trainee, but a lot more a colleague on site. Even those of you who started in your school setting in the fall, usually by 2nd semester, the teachers seek you out as a resource. On mental health sites, your colleagues seek you out for consultation. And really the biggest thing that separates you from your colleagues on site is they're getting paid, and you're probably not. And to answer the question that might come up about pay, we don't necessarily have a problem with students receiving a stipend. We had a career center that Rutgers actually used to give students a small stipend, but you cannot 100% double dip with your job and with your internship. So those of you who are on a mental health, you are employed in a mental health site, or you are employed in a school, that is a 1-by-1 discussion. But I can tell you in general that you have to do your hours outside of your normal work. So in a different division, with a different population, with a different supervisor, those are the types of things. Those of you that are in the school, let your heart rate go down a little bit. As an educator, if that's what your job is in the school, as an educator, as an administrative person, being in the counseling office does not double dip. So you can be a teacher at a school and do your placement at your school setting, as long as your job is not counselor in that school setting. And many of our people do that, okay? So you're diving full on in. You're in the spring semester, and for those of you who are a fall start group, you are dreaming of graduation in May. Those of you that started in January, your light at the end of the tunnel is a little longer because you don't graduate until August. Classwork for this semester is incredibly reflective. My goal in internship 2 is have you be able to reflect on who you are as a counselor. We start that journey in practicum with some counselor orientation and looking at your history and looking at who you are as a counselor, but we really revisit that on a week-by-week basis. Journaling, you get really deep. We expect a lot of reflection, but that's the majority of your work in internship 2 are those journals. They're interspersed with supervision boards and with a couple action vision boards. You have one major assignment, and that's that continuation of the CADI. So this one we call a comprehensive CADI, and it's incredibly thorough because it includes information from many of the classes that you've taken. You'll have something in there for assessments. You'll have something in there for ethics. You'll have something in there for human development and for multicultural and all of that. And so it's a bigger document, and that's really the main assignment in the class. Otherwise, it's always will have boards because that's what online education is. But it's really, I laugh and say that while you're full on diving in, it really is the semester where you literally feel like you're floating on the water. You're stressed and you're ready to graduate, but you know what you're doing on site, and you really are, your anxiety about doing it on site has reduced. So you actually, what I call, are in the flow. You're enjoying the work you're doing. It's creative. There's energy to it that's not being taken away by being concerned about, am I doing this right? And let me tell you guys, imposter syndrome is real. Expect it and use your self-talk and your coping skills to not allow it to rob you from enjoying the time that you are on site. We'll talk about imposter syndrome in practicum, so we will address that. But I just want to tell you now, these fears of, oh my goodness, am I going to be able to work with a client? Oh my goodness, am I going to know what I'm going to do? Absolutely, you will. The answer is yes. And you just keep telling yourselves that, because every counselor started out where you are. Every single counselor started out sitting in the chair for their very first time, opposite of a client or a group, and worried about, holy mackerel, am I going to be able to do this? Everyone. So let's talk some nuts and bolts. I want a really great training experience. We want you to have a really great training experience. So the journey begins here, not Journey the band, for those of you that are old enough to recognize who they are, but the journey, like in the mountains. And trust me, it is up and down and back and forth, because like any journey, when you're dealing with mental health and you're dealing with counseling and you're dealing with growth, is not a straight line, right? So your counselor training journey isn't either. Okay, we are right about there at 7 months out. So what should you be doing? You're doing it exactly right now. You're attending your field work orientation. I'm going to have Mr. Pacifico talk in a moment about purchasing Tavera. You're going to review the manual that is in the organization page. Y'all all have access. You all should have access to the counseling organization. There is a tab for practicum and internship, and in there is your manual. You're going to begin preparing your resume and cover letter. I would encourage you to go to the Career Center. And let me do this because I actually think, okay, this is the graphic. I'm going to jump ahead because I forgot that I made a slide for this. I got so excited making my slides. Okay. And you're going to then, this is a very important thing. Look on Google. Look on, once you purchase Tavera, you'll have access to all of our sites that we've used in the past. There's also some sites, old ones, that are on the organization page. So what I want you to do is I want you to do a brain dump. List every site within what you would consider driving distance. And I'll tell you what I consider driving distance. My husband commutes to DC. It's about 45 minutes. But if you live in New Jersey, that could be 5 miles away, right? So you want to extend your net far enough that you get enough sites, because you may be contacting 30 to 35 sites, because of those 30 to 35 sites, probably 25 won't ever get back to you. It's unfortunate, but it's true. So remember that when you are a counselor and able to take an intern, of what it felt like when nobody got back to you. Okay, so you're gonna, right now, all you're gonna do is you're gonna make a dump of every site you could possibly use. Google is awesome. I love how when I put into Google, I'll put in like counseling and the county in New Jersey, it will show me every agency that's in close proximity. So when you make that list, you can start doing some just basic research on the sites to determine if they're even a good fit for you. I will tell you that sole practices, like sole private practices, and in general, most private practices are not going to be appropriate. We have had some excellent private practices that run themselves more like an agency. That has worked for us. But like a typical private practice where your supervisor charges you for supervision, that's not going to be a training site. As I mentioned, I'm not a huge fan of inpatient, because you're really not going to get ongoing experiences. I also, that's a key thing, you have to actually be able to do work on the site. There's a wonderful site in New Jersey that loves our students to observe, but you have to do more than observe. You have to actually be the counselor doing the work on the site. Okay, and so by researching some of the sites, you can pare down your list, but the initial dump is every site that could potentially be a possibility, and then you start scratching them out. Okay, that gets us to 3 to 5 months out. Okay, by this time you would have purchased Tavera. By the way, let me go back to 3 to 5 months out, and then I'll go back to what makes the site good. So you're going to have purchased Tavera, not Travera. You're going to purchase Tavera. You're going to attach your transcript, cover letter, resume, and you're going to continue seeking a site. At this point, you're going to actually reach out to sites. And students that are school counseling, you're going to, at the same time, I know it's going to be stressful, at the same time, you're going to be looking for a school site as well, because I'll explain that in just a minute. So what makes a good site? Here we go. As I mentioned, it allows you to do direct service. But here's what I actually wanted you to see, the appropriate supervisor. So those of you writing notes, that's great. Understand this is all in your manual. So everything that I'm talking about is really pretty much like our requirements are in the manual. An appropriate supervisor is for a mental health site. So for everybody for practicum is a licensed professional counselor, so an LPC, licensed mental health counselor, LMHC. Depending on where you live, it might be one of the two. I know Ohio calls them PCCs. So it's whatever counseling credential. Licensed clinical social worker, licensed psychologist, licensed marriage and family therapist. Those are all appropriate credentials to supervise you. For those of you looking for a school site, your supervisor needs to have their state certification in school counseling, whether the state calls it an endorsement, a credential, or a certification. In New Jersey, it's a certification. If you are looking to get a placement at a private school for school counselors, understand, check that out, because in a private school setting, you are not required to have a certification to be a counselor in a private school. And we have had that happen. I had a student who actually worked in the school, thought her supervisor was a New Jersey certified school counselor and was not. And it was late July, and she was supposed to start on site in the middle of August. And she had to scurry to find a separate supervisor because her supervisor didn't have the appropriate credential. So make sure that you check that out. And that's something that Mr. Pacifico is going to be helping you with, is vetting the sites to make sure that they are a good site. And he's also going to be looking to make sure that they're focused on training, that you're just not filling a hole there. Like, you know, that's the conversation I had yesterday with my student, is that her site, every time that she has an opening, they're putting in an intake or a new client, despite the fact that she's already told them, like 6 clients ago, 8 is my maximum, because they've lost counselors. And so now they're using their interns to fill a hole instead of hire a new employee. You also want to try and be at a site that's going to fit your goals. So those of you that want to work with children, don't just take a site right away because that site takes you and is adult focused. You know, unless you want to have that kind of experience where you really expand your options to see what you like. First and foremost, try and find a site that's going to be a better fit for you, that can really help you in the long run. Okay. There's my slide. I will be uploading the presentation, by the way, after we finish our three times. So this, I should have looked this over right before I was like in the creative mode when I was writing it. And I always forget that I include everything in the slides and then I talk about them before I get to them. Okay, so 3 to 5 months out. This is what I want to talk about. You've already seen me. I've already talked to you about what you're attaching in Tavera, and Mr. Pacifico is going to go through that with you when the time comes. But here's the deal. Now that you've done some research on the sites that you brainstormed, you want to start contacting the sites, and don't just contact them once. Follow up if you don't hear back from them. You're sending them your resume and your cover letter. Everyone does things email nowadays. And you're requesting to speak with them about the possibility to intern. Okay. And like I said, school students, you're going to need to be looking for a fall placement. And the reason for this is because most school districts, even though they don't close down in the summer, they typically don't have staff in the schools to say that they're willing to take on an intern. And board meetings are spaced out. In New Jersey and in other states, a lot of other states, you have to go, not you personally, you don't have to show up at their board meeting. They will put forth the proposal to hire you as an intern or to take you on as an intern with the district, and you have to get approved at the district level. And that's usually done in a board meeting. So a lot of school districts may have a board meeting in June and not again until August. And at that point, you're like, oh no, I'm supposed to be starting on site in like 2 weeks. You don't want to stress yourself out. It's less stressful to look for 2 sites at one time than it is to worry that your site's going to fall through with no other options in August. Okay. 2 months out, oh my gosh, you can see it happening. It's almost May. Well, it's spring break, really. You should have a site secured. We understand that not everybody does. I will say that 75% of our students probably have their site secured on time, on what we consider on time, so that we're not stressed. The other 25% are still looking. We actually do end up having people, a handful of people who are still looking for a site a week before the semester begins. We work with you all the way up until the point where we have to cry uncle. And let me tell you, why do we cry uncle? Usually because somebody's work life or home life is restrictive enough that they cannot make the time for a site to be able to be on that site. It is not usually because a site's not willing to take them. So keep that in mind. One of the things you can do literally right now is start working with your significant others, with your family members, with your employers, with your friends, all of those things to help provide you enough space so you can carve out the time to put towards placement. I will not tell you you need to quit your job, because I've had people work full time and complete their placement. It's a little crazy, it is, but I will tell you, you're going to have those tough conversations about how can they help you out. Your employer, can you work 3 long days and take 2 days off? Can you work weekends? Can you, because it's harder to find a site that has nighttime and weekend hours. I will tell you that. It's not impossible, but it's harder. So you want to have those conversations so that if you do need to use all their gravitas, you can. And this is particularly true for those of you who have commitments, whether it be being a parent, job, outside commitments, that you have figured out what that's going to look like for you for this year. It really is a year. It's a year-long process. It goes from May to May. Okay. Your supervisor at this point, when you've secured a site, is going to be interacting with Tavera and Mr. Pacifico as well. And that's just getting all the I's dotted, all the T's crossed, so that you are set up in the system, approved by the university, and ready to go on day one. 1 month out, this is when you want to secure your insurance and upload it into the Tavera portal. These are 3 companies that we often use. ACA student membership comes with insurance. HPSO is the company that, I believe that's the company that ACA uses, and Lockton is the company that NBCC uses. So there are other insurance providers, but they offer these offer student insurance for like $35. Like I said, if you buy your ACA membership, that will become part of your membership. So you get membership in a professional organization plus your insurance at the same time. Before you start your placement, all of your required documents are going to be in Tavera, and you need to make sure that once everything is set to go, Mr. Pacifico is going to be sending an email to your supervisor that has their unique login information. They have to click on that and log in, because it's one of those links that expires. And so they cannot wait until you submit your first logs. Just because they've submitted things to Tavera as a supervisor, like the forms, that doesn't log them in as your course tied supervisor on site. So they have to make that extra step. Okay, so where are we at? We're almost ready. Okay, this is your overview. First step, Tavera. You will purchase Tavera, and Mr. Pacifico is going to talk with us right now about how you do that.
Okay, so hi everyone again. So looking at Tavera a little bit today, getting my feet wet with Tavera, but you're in good hands here. Just a little bit overview of Tavera, and I definitely want to send you guys this in writing and then go over it again. However, Tavera is an online program, like Dr. Kolstad said, that you're going to do a lot of these formatting and documentation in. So you're going to all your agreements, all the signatures and affiliations with your supervisors and the sites themselves. You will do that all through Tavera. Tavera is I think it's a very friendly program. Everything's pretty straightforward right there, and you will pay for it, I believe, independently. I'm going to have all that documented for you guys and in writing, just so you have it. But it's roughly, with processing fees and taxes and whatnot, it's about $220. I think exactly $223. But you will buy that independently, and the point of that is to have all your logs and all your hours and all those things with you for forever. You'll need those things going forward with licensure, state forms, etc. Like I said to Dr. Kolstad, like I want to go over it a little bit more in detail when I have all the information compiled, as I'm learning it as well. But I've found that it's something very beneficial. I didn't use it when I was going through the program. It's something that's been new as of recently. And I can tell you, just from looking at it, it is a tremendous help in this entire process for you. It's going to make things a lot easier on both ends. And I think it's completely worth it. And you'll see as you're entering practicum and going through your field sites and your placements, it's going to help you more and more as you get closer to the end, and especially when you're going for licensure. And Dr. Kolstad, if you don't mind me, just my personal experience, like she said before, definitely start thinking about this and have your conversations months and months out. I know when I was going through the process, I didn't have to have many of those difficult conversations, but I know it is a very family-oriented process, and it can be very time-consuming. So it's easier to have those conversations with whether it's family or your occupation or your work now, just because, like Dr. Kolstad said, yes, it is going to be something you're going to have to balance, but it's going to be rewarding in the end.
Right, and I just want to add that Mr. Pacifico made the comment that it's helpful for licensure. You have access to Tavera after you graduate from the program. You kind of flip a switch with them, and it then starts tracking your hours for your license, which is so beneficial because many people just have to purchase a program like this after they graduate in order to be able to do that. So we're just kind of including, you're including this in your education. We have also made great efforts to reduce your cost of textbooks where we can. So we have replaced some textbooks with open access resources, ebooks that are available through the library. So we've switched over so that we've reduced some of your textbook load so that it evens out with that $220 cost. Because I know that for some people it's like, yikes. Unfortunately, you cannot use financial aid to cover that. it can't go through the bookstore. And I know that buying books through the bookstore, that's how you do it for financial aid. So anyhow, but I would encourage purchasing it sooner than later. I believe you can just go on to Tavera and do that. Yeah.
Yes.
And then that way you have our list all ready and you can start mowing through it. Okay, the second step is searching. This is finding the site. Secure your site. Negotiate. Do not be so excited when your site says, yes, we'll take you on, that you say, fine, I'll be there whenever you want. Because we know that you don't have those kind of lives. Otherwise, you probably would not be in an online program. We'll be being real here. So negotiate your times, dates, and duties. Let them understand what your limits are. You may end up doing more than the 7 hours a week because some sites will say, no, we can't take you unless it's 10 to 15 hours per week. The bonus is that you don't lose those hours. They do, for those of you that want to pursue LPC, they do go towards your license hours. You're allowed up to 1,500 pre-master's hours, but we don't count them towards the next semester. But you don't lose them. It's not, you'll still be able to document them. Propose, put all the forms in, finalize, buy your insurance, 1 million, 3 million. So for those of you that are American School Counseling Association members, their insurance is not sufficient. They're 1 million, 1 million. It has to be 1 million, 3 million per the university, okay? So keep that. That's why I recommend being a member of ACA or going through HPSO or Lockton. And then yes, get excited to start practicum. And if you are nervous, you must watch, oh gosh, Kelly, I think the TED Talk is called How to Make Stress Your Friend. And it's really lovely because it talks about the idea that maybe stress being negative is all in our mind. It's how we view it. Maybe stress, maybe that kind of fast heart rate, maybe that little tickle, that kind of numbness is actually our body being excited to start something new, right? Isn't it better to view that than the opposite, which is stress is bad? It's horrible for me, right? Especially as a grad student, y'all deal with stress a lot, right? Okay, so this is the overview. Like I said, in a couple days, you will get this in that organization portal and we will have it up there. And so here comes some of those questions. I'm gonna go through these and then I'm gonna ask Mr. Pacifico to throw other ones out that, that are maybe more nuanced than the general areas and y'all can ask questions. Will I receive assistance in getting placed throughout the sequence? As I tell students that are coming into the program, we do have Mr. Pacifico, our assistant clinical coordinator. He will work with you as little or as much as you need. We have some students who come in who know exactly where they want to go. Maybe they've done the research, they've already talked to places. When y'all take certain classes, you might have had the opportunity to talk to professionals and you may already be ahead of the game. Awesome, great for you. We may have some people who have zero clue and really need a lot more support. That's awesome as well. Makes him earn his money, right? Put him to work. But you do, the biggest thing, self-advocate. We cannot know that you need assistance. You have to be reaching out and letting us know, letting Mr. Pacifico know that you need some support, okay? And that's the same thing is true when you are on site. You're having trouble with your supervisor, you're struggling to get your hours, your course instructor, whether it's me or one of our other instructors, and your assistant clinical coordinator are your supports. You're not bothering us by reaching out, but we can't know that you need support unless you let us know. Will I be able to create my own schedule at my site? Absolutely. You're working with your schedule and your site's abilities. You may have to find a happy medium. That's a reality. You know, if your site is only open till 5 o'clock, like I said, you may need to find a way to be able to be there, you know, earlier in the day because, and work with your, you know, family or work situation in order to be able to free up that time. But, you know, like I said, there are sites out there that, like one I'm thinking of right away that wants you a whole year, but it's an excellent training site is Wayne. Wayne Counseling has weekend hours, nighttime hours, and they will throw you clients the moment you walk through the door. On the other hand, Counseling Center at Clark is one of the sites that has a lot of opportunities, nighttime hours, but they're very slow at getting you to see clients. They start you with observation and then group, and then you start to have clients. So there are, you want to look at your schedule and you want to work with your site to make it work for you. But absolutely, that's part of the process of doing the brainstorming and the research, is finding a site that's going to work with it. Is it possible to move to different sites as we transition through the sequence? Let me tackle school counseling first. School counseling students, I think it is awesome if you are at more than one site. Now, you can do it 10 and 10 in 10 and 10 each semester. You can do it one site in fall, one site in spring. My favorite is 15 and 5, and then you flip who has 15 and who has 5 the next semester. So for example, in the fall, college act and advising and transition is really huge in the high school setting. And in the elementary setting, you're really getting the kiddos used to being at school and doing some developmental guidance. The next semester, you might do only 5 hours in the high school and then 15 hours in the elementary setting, because a little less is going on in the high school setting. You're really just getting course requests and failures, which is kind of interesting in and of itself. But the elementary setting is usually ramping up. There's more going on. There's a little bit more relationship stuff going on. Behaviors in the classrooms are happening, all of those things. So I do encourage you to go to more than one site. For our mental health students, I encourage you, if you want to switch sites, to do 2 semesters and 2 semesters, or 3 semesters and then internship 3 in a different setting. Most mental health sites want you for a year. So for that reason, that's what we encourage. Also, because you're going to be working ongoing with clients, you can't really just say, oh, I'm done after 15 weeks, bye. And then you start up with a whole new caseload, because that's going to be crazy making for you, because you have to build that caseload. So it's nice to be able to have that over time. What about sites that have expiring contracts, no contract? We are very happy to work with the sites to extend the contract by putting in a new contract, or by developing a contract with a site that does not have one. Now, here's the sticking point, okay? If your site has their own contract, run. Don't actually run, but do understand that you probably do need to be keeping in mind a backup site, because our legal office is, I think, like one person, and they take ages. I believe we finally did get everybody's non-standard, we call them non-standard because it's not our standard agreement. I believe we finally got everybody's non-standard agreements back in time for everybody to start in May, but it was a struggle. And we have had it, though, where people have not been able to start on site for a month, 6 weeks, because their contract has been stuck in legal. So I would encourage sites that don't require a non-standard, but I won't tell you don't do it. If it's a really great training site, we'll do our darndest to get that contract through. We can be very nudgy. We can. We actually now have the name of somebody who can nudge for us, which is wonderful, because we didn't have that before. Somebody in the legal office who will actually make things happen. So that's a positive thing. Is it too late to switch? Absolutely not. Those of you that want to, if you want to switch from school to mental health, you're really just missing one class, which is orientation to professional counseling. Most students don't take statistics until later in their program anyway. And so you would just get slotted into orientation to professional counseling, preferably this spring instead of one of your courses. We could work with you. That would actually be a Dr. Mayarella email and CC me. If you are mental health and you want to go into school counseling, you're missing counseling and supervision in the schools, and then learning and behavior modification. So those would be 2 courses you'd have to pick up, but it's not we've had people that have switched after practicum. It's not a huge deal. We just need to figure out, we need to finagle the schedule with you to make sure that you get all of your courses in. You are not wedded to the program that you are in if you don't want to be. We have a lot of students who actually will switch over to school counseling and do the EDS so that they can get both. But we have the same number of students, probably a little bit more, that actually switch out of school counseling. They realize that they want to be in mental health instead of school counseling. Mental health, I will be honest, there are more jobs available. Although right now it's kind of crazy. People are leaving the educational setting in like in buses, not just droves. They're like busing out, like U-hauling out of the educational setting because of COVID. So whatever your career goal changes have been, we are happy to work with you. And then I've already addressed what practicum and internship coursework will look like. So I'm hoping that that's good. We'll stay on for a bit because I know that I talk a lot, but I want to start answering y'all's specific questions that you're bringing to us. I'm going to unshare at some point. Yeah, here we go. Okay. Anybody have questions?
Oh, I have a question. If you don't mind, can you go over what qualifies as hours that can be logged again?
Okay, so there's two different types of hours: direct hours and indirect hours. Indirect hours are those things like going to trainings, case notes, research, supervision, observation on site. Those are all indirect. Direct hours are direct intervention hours with clients or students. This is when you are sitting with an individual or walking around with them, and you are engaging in counseling activities, not case management, not peer support, not milieu support, but actually working as a counselor with them. And so that could be individual counseling, group, couple, family. We restrict the number of group hours you can do. We do not require you to do group. We think it's great, but we definitely want you doing ongoing counseling work. So you need to be having individuals that you are able to meet with a minimum of 6 times. So for practicum, you're really talking about 2 clients that you can see, hopefully over the course of much of the summer semester. In the school setting, we actually reduce your requirements for ongoing hours because you're going to be getting a ton of those one shot, 15 minutes, so-and-so was mean to me, or I'm not feeling well. Can I sit in your office and talk to you? 15-minute brief interventions. So we actually balance it for our school counseling students, but our mental health students, we're training you to be therapists. So you need to be able to do that deeper, longer work.
Thank you.
Sarah, you were about to jump in. You were, okay. It looked like you were, I think you unmuted, so I thought you did. Anybody else? Carissa.
Yeah, I have a question. So does it have to be a nonprofit mental health setting, or could it be, I don't know, I just want a little clarification on that.
Well, that is a great question. As I mentioned, we have had some really awesome for-profit settings. We look at each one of them individually. We used to definitely prefer nonprofit, but there are so many great agencies out there that are for-profit that really do a lot of pro bono, sliding scale. Because you can't bill insurance, they would have to be places that actually accept people that would not be necessarily be billing, that would not be billing insurance. Again, that's where Mr. Pacifico jumps in, is he looks at your site to determine whether it's going to be appropriate. I've had somebody propose a private practice site before, and the first sign to me that it was not a good site was that the supervisor was going to charge them $100 an hour for supervision every week. And that to me tells me that their time is worth more than their training focus. So, yeah. Nan.
Any word about the telehealth? Everywhere I'm looking there, I'm seeing a lot of opportunities for telehealth, but are there any that you have seen that have come across that might be opportunities we could use, or do you want us just to be in person?
While COVID is still rearing its ugly head, we have allowed our students to continue to do telecounseling, telehealth. So you want to do training for it? Like, I would not expect you just to jump in and get on screen. They have some great trainings out there that are free. Free is the operative word. So that, you know, I even have access to PESI's training that they put out. It's a 2-day training that they did when COVID first hit that I share with students. It's very long, it's 12 hours, but it's really thorough. But yes, we are still allowing, telehealth.
And I think you probably said it. And when we're signing up for the practicum, how many hours, just so we can like budget and that kind of stuff, are each of the semesters? Is it going to be 6 per semester?
You mean 6 credits?
Yes.
Oh.
How many credit hours are we basically, so that those of us that need to budget for these experiences?
Okay, so that's a really awesome question. You will be taking 6 credits each semester. You will have practicum and another class, internship 1 and another class, internship 2 and another class. If, if say, for example, you did not want to take your placement semesters with another class, internship 1, internship 2, and internship 3 are financial aid eligible. And interestingly, I believe, and I'm not a financial aid guru, but I believe if you were not to take a class with practicum, because it's the summer semester, you don't have to have 6 credits in the summer. So technically speaking, you could do each of those classes alone. They're all 3 credit classes though. So, but if you're getting financial aid, that's the nice thing is that you actually can take it alone, but that's really only for those of you that maybe are out of order in the program, have switched programs, or maybe are okay graduating later, but want to get your clinicals done. We don't encourage you to delay other courses to take practicum and internship by itself, because we really feel like we try our hardest to make it doable. Internship 2 in another class is definitely doable. Same with internship 1. Practicum is just stressful because it's a shorter period of time and it's more work in the class. But like I said, if you're organized, you can take 2 classes without a problem, and most people do. The rarity is somebody who does not take 2 classes.
Hi, Dr. Kolstad. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead,
Oh,
go ahead,
okay.
Catherine.
I had a question about the summer hours. So the 100 hours needs to be in between the start of the semester and the end of the semester. So our 100 hours needs to be completed by the last day of summer semester.
That is our anticipation. We
Okay.
do have times where students need extra time.
Okay.
Sometimes, for example, our educators don't get fully on site until the end of the school year, right?
That's why I was
So,
asking, because I'm a
yeah.
teacher. So
Yeah, so in that case, you may not get your summer break because you may have to stay on site in August. We end towards the beginning of August. We work with that. We work with you on that. Most of our educators actually do end up getting their hours in.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they do.
So could you spend more hours? I think it said around 8 hours a week total. Is that correct? Or maybe 7? Could you do more to make up for that
Yes,
possibly a couple weeks lost time?
yeah, you have to have a site presence at the start. Like all across the semester, you have to have a site presence, but you may start with like only 3 hours a week on site, like 1 evening a week on site.
Okay.
Because you don't get out of school until 3-4 o'clock. So we are okay with that because we know that that is going to happen. You just work that out with your site.
Okay. Thank you.
Sarah.
So my question was, are there any sites, you mentioned a couple, but that you feel like Seton Hall students have just had really phenomenal experiences with?
Well, what age range do you want to work with?
Adults,
Okay.
young adults all the way up.
Okay, because I was going to say, because Mill Hill is fantastic, but that's over by Trenton and it's children. There have been a lot. I mean, we really have had a lot of really wonderful sites. I tend to want students to stay away from substance abuse focused sites because I feel like they don't allow you to do as much mental health. So I like more of the agency setting. I'd really have to look at the list to be able to say, yeah, this was great. And I'd have to like think about it. The ones that stand out to me, definitely Wayne is one that stands out to me. And that's because they definitely are a site that are very much Wayne and Resolve. Those are 2 sites. Resolve's fantastic. They actually have 3 of our students there right now. But because they're very much across the board, you'll see substance abuse clients, you'll work with kids, you'll work with adults, you'll work with adolescents, you'll work with elderly. Those sites are very much, whatever is in their community, they're coming to see them. Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions? Well, if you have questions as they come up, please don't hesitate to reach out to Mr. Pacifico. Just like, go ahead and email him. If he doesn't have an answer to it, he'll email me.
Absolutely.
But we're here to support you, which I think is my next slide. Hang on, I have to show my last little bit of slides. Gosh. The future is yours. We are here to help. And there's our emails right there. You'll find them in the SHU system anyway. But anthony.pacifico@shu.edu and jody.colston@shu.edu. Okay. Thanks, guys, for being our first group. Hope you learned a lot.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye, thank you.
Can I
Okay,
ask
so-
you
Yeah.
for a favor? Can you
Yeah.
please send me that recording?
Then let me stop recording. Let me stop recording. How do where? Okay, there we go. I'm going to stop. Yes.